The car finally gave out. Jeff hit the dashboard in frustration. It was bad enough that the car had to break down, but at night, in the rain, in the middle of God knows wherever he was, it was a fitting end to such a bad week. First, his wife left him, taking the kids with her. Then he was demoted at his job and was now forced to go back on the road as a salesman. Now this had happened, and things weren't going to get any better anytime soon. Jeff decided that he might as well try to find a way out of this mess. He considered waiting in his car for another car to come by and help him. The road wasn't often used though, and that might take hours. So Jeff decided to walk down the road to see if there were any other options. After walking for a half hour in the pounding rain, Jeff finally came across an old house in the woods. Now Jeff had seen enough horror movies to make him turn back, but the rain alone was enough to override his sense of fear and trepidation. He walked up the winding road to the door. The house looked to be very old and not kept up well, and Jeff wondered if anyone even lived there anymore. He knocked on the door, and to his surprise, it was answered rather quickly. An older man, looking to be in his late 70s, asked him what he wanted. Jeff explained his situation and asked him if he had a phone or somewhere to help. The old man said he was wary of travelers, but decided that Jeff looked honest enough and let him use his phone. Jeff thanked him and asked his name. He said his name was Joseph Palmer and told Jeff the number of the nearest garage. Jeff made his way through to the phone, noticing that the house looked about as old inside as it did outside, and was surprised that there was even a phone. He called the garage, but they said there was nothing they could do until the morning, and that they would meet him at noon by his car. Mr. Palmer offered Jeff the guest room to sleep in for the night. Jeff was a bit wary at spending the night in such a spooky old house, but decided that the walk back in the rain and sleeping in the car couldn't be much safer than staying at the house. He accepted and was shown to the room. The house was adorned with antique everything. Not a piece of furniture seemed to have been purchased in at least the last 60 years or more. Mr. Palmer showed him to the room and bid him good night. The man was nice, but the whole situation still left Jeff unnerved. He tried to tell himself that he had watched too many horror movies as a child. The bedroom had a canopy bed, one old lamp, a single window, and a red carpet. The house was eerily quiet as Jeff laid himself down on the bed. Quiet, except for a creak here and a thump there. By now, Jeff's imagination had him too paranoid to sleep, as he heard Mr. Palmer outside the room, walking up and down the hallway outside. Up he went, and down he went. Then the footsteps stopped, right outside his room. Jeff waited, and yet nothing happened. A half hour passed, and yet he heard nothing except the rain beating outside and the wind howling as the storm went on. Finally, sleep slowly overcame Jeff, even with his nervousness heightened. Slowly, his eyes closed, though he thought he could almost hear something scratching at his door. Jeff awoke. The storm had passed. The daylight was shining through the window curtains. Happy that all this nervousness was for nothing, Jeff got out of bed and checked his watch. He had slept in until 11:20, and he had to leave quickly before the people from the garage got to his car. Leaving the room, he was greeted by Mr. Palmer. Palmer asked him if he had slept well. Jeff replied that he had, though he did have trouble falling asleep. Palmer laughed and asked if he was afraid of the old house at night in the middle of nowhere. Jeff admitted that maybe he was a bit afraid, but he felt silly for it now. He thanked Palmer and said he had to leave quickly to get to his car. He turned to leave when suddenly something banged on his head and everything went dark.
When Jeff came to, he was tied to a chair in the basement. The place reeked of horrible smells. Mr. Palmer walked up to him with a large knife in his hand. Jeff screamed and tried to free himself, but only tired himself out. He looked up in horror at Mr. Palmer and asked him why he was doing this. Why right now? Palmer answered that last night he would have been nervous, full of fear, and ready for any attack Palmer would do. No, that wasn't the right time. Everyone expects attacks at night. But during the morning, people are more relaxed and the fear is low, making them blind to any chance of harm. Jeff asked him again, why was he doing this? What was he going to do with him? And said someone, like the garage people, would find out what happened to him. Mr. Palmer said that mishaps happen on highways at night, mainly during storms, so hardly anyone would even think twice as to why he was gone. Jeff looked into Palmer's eyes as he walked towards him. His eyes were completely black, and Jeff tried to scream.
I live on a small farm, far out in the country. Every year, my dad puts out scarecrows in the fields because he thinks they're effective in not only keeping the crows out, but evil spirits as well. I guess he's a little superstitious. The scarecrows he sets out are the same ones, year after year. After so much wear and tear, they were showing their age. This October started out just like any other October. The weather was turning cool, and the leaves were beginning to change into brilliant orange and yellow colors. One Saturday, us kids got together and decided to make a new scarecrow. Being creative, we gathered our supplies and got to work. This scarecrow was going to be different. This was my special design. I wanted a creepy scarecrow, much scarier than the others. Hours later, we finished up. Indeed, he was the ugliest, most frightening scarecrow I'd ever seen. I was so proud. Mom called us up for supper, so we planted the scarecrow out in the cornfield, where I could see it from my bedroom window. Not giving it any more thought, we went in and ate dinner. Soon the wind picked up, and it began to lightning. No storm was forecasted, but it looked like we were in for a rough night. Light rain began falling as I went up to bed. I was worried about my new scarecrow, so I peeked out my window. What I saw shocked me. He was there all right, but not where we placed him. It appears to me that he was several feet from the right. Puzzled, I stood at the window and watched intently. The lightning was bright, and every time it flashed, I could see my scarecrow. The problem was, it looked as if he was moving when the sky was dark, only to turn up in another spot when the sky was lit up. Thinking that I must be imagining things, I put my pajamas on and went to bed. Later on, a loud crack of thunder woke me up. By now, the rain was pounding down, making it difficult to see out my window. I slipped on my shoes and snuck outside to check on the scarecrow. Not sure where he was, I walked around in the thunderstorm, half blinded by the cold, stinging rain. Clumsily, I stumbled over a fallen branch and fell face down in a patch of mud. When I looked up, there was my scarecrow, glaring down at me. His eyes were huge and glowing red. I couldn't pick myself up fast enough. I ran screaming to the house and never looked back. After tossing and turning the rest of the night, I woke up to bright sunshine and the smell of bacon. Not wanting to tell my parents what had happened last night, I sat quietly and ate my breakfast. Anxious and apprehensive, I then went outside to look around. My dad was already looking for damage around the house, but I was looking for my Scarecrow. I could see the other Scarecrows, all in their usual places, but my Scarecrow was nowhere to be seen. Full of confusion, I began crying, not because of losing the Scarecrow, but because of pure, unadulterated fear. My father told me that he probably blew away in the storm and would be discovered in a field during the harvest. I knew better. Somehow, some way, that Scarecrow came alive. How? I don't know. 10 years have passed, and to this day, I have never seen my Scarecrow again. What happened that stormy night? Do scarecrows really keep out evil spirits? Or can they be possessed by one? I don't live on that farm anymore, but I've never ventured outside during a thunderstorm ever again.